preparing for more war. That is what NATO says Putin is doing tonight. But while Putin makes slight gains in eastern Ukraine, his military is still suffering heavy losses. You can see, we're going to show you in this new video into Outfront. This is a night vision recording of an attack by Ukraine on Russian troops in eastern Ukraine. According to Ukrainian forces, the Russian convoy unexpectedly moved in on the Ukrainian forces, and Ukraine responded. We're going to show you the aftermath from the air. Complete destruction. The turret of a combat vehicle just torn off. And then we'll show you from the ground, Russian fighting vehicles blown to pieces, really. This is only one part of the problem facing Putin's forces tonight. A growing divide also between Putin's official army and his private Wagner force is also impacting the fight. Today, the Wagner chief is accusing Russia's defense ministry of, quote, treason.
The chief of the general staff and the Minister of Defense are handing out commands right and left that the Wagner PMC should not receive ammunition. They are also not helping with air transport. There is direct opposition. This can be equated to high treason.
All of this as Putin and Biden both delivered major addresses today in advance of the one-year anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Biden declaring in no uncertain terms the commitment of the U.S. and NATO to help Ukraine, while Putin rattles his nuclear saber. Biden spoke in Poland just hours after his historic visit to Kyiv.
1 year ago, the world was bracing for the fall of Kyiv. Well, I've just come from a visit to Kyiv, and I can report Kyiv stands strong. Kyiv stands proud. It stands tall. And most important, it stands free. President Putin's craven lust for land and power will fail, and the Ukrainian people's love for their country will prevail. Democracies of the world will stand guard over freedom today, tomorrow, and forever.
But Putin isn't going to be giving up anytime soon. Tonight, he's getting support from one of his biggest and most powerful allies, China. China's top diplomat arriving in Moscow today for meetings. And according to the Wall Street Journal, Chinese President Xi Jinping is now planning to meet with Putin in Moscow in the coming months. We've got all of the angles covered for you tonight. Let's start with Phil Mattingly. He's in Warsaw. That's where Biden spoke today, of course. Phil, how closely was Biden watching Putin?
You know, Kate, when you talk to U.S. officials, they make clear this speech was not a focal point of the president's day, nor did it drive major edits or changes to the address he gave just a few hours later in Warsaw. Their view of President Biden's goal with the remarks today, remarks that he'd been planning and telling advisors he wanted to make for several months, was to make a larger argument, paint a broader picture of the war that's ongoing and the kind of stakes at hand for Western democracies, not just Russia, not just Ukraine. However, the president was explicit in his rebuke of President Putin, mentioning his name 10 separate times, attempting to put to rest the very argument President Putin made for why Russia invaded in his remarks today, but also over the course of the last 11 months. That was intentional and something White House officials made clear the president wanted to do in an explicit manner. But the broader goal of the speech, laying out the stakes, laying out the dynamics here, underscored something that was very clear, and U.S. officials have seen in those hour and 45-minute remarks from President Putin today, and that's that there is no end game anytime soon. There is no off-ramp. There is no indication whatsoever that President Putin is going to decelerate an effort that has only been expanding over the course of the last 11 months. And that, more than anything else, has driven the president's actions the last several days, trying to underscore that for all of the progress, all of the ability to defend Ukraine and keep the coalition together over the course of the last 11 months, there is a long and difficult path ahead. And this fight is about more than just Ukraine and Russia, something the president wanted to get across. Now, it's worth noting our colleagues Oren Lieberman and Natasha Bertrand are reporting that Russia actually engaged in an intercontinental ballistic missile test yesterday while President Biden was in Kyiv. According to sources, that test, U.S. officials believe, failed. It was not considered an anomaly, nor was it considered an escalation, something that Russia has tested before in the past, but it was expected to have been mentioned in President Putin's remarks earlier today. Had it been successful, you'll notice it was absent from those remarks. They believe it failed, Kate.
So interesting. Good to see you, Phil. Thank you so much. And while, as Phil mentioned, Biden mentioned Putin by name 10 times in his speech today, Putin did not mention Biden once in his lengthy address in Moscow. Matthew Chance is out front.
With a fanfare, the Russian president takes to the stage for a longer-awaited State of the Nation address. But nearly a year since his invasion of Ukraine, no sign of remorse or regret, only bitterness towards the West.
The responsibility for fueling the Ukrainian conflict, for its escalation, for the number of victims lies completely with Western elites and, of course, with the current Kyiv regime, for whom the Ukrainian people are essentially strangers.
Blaming others is how the Kremlin tries to explain why its special military operation,
let's move down this way,
meant to last just days or weeks, is almost in its second year, with no end in sight. Should we run that way? Across Russia, there were even public screenings of the speech to ensure the Kremlin message is heard, that military setbacks, failures and bloodshed are all part of a conspiracy to bring Russia to its knees.
The Western elites do not conceal their goals. As they say, it's a direct quote, to bring Russia a strategic defeat. What does that mean for us? It means to end us once and for all. We understand it exactly and will react to it accordingly because this is about the very existence of our country.
It doesn't feel that way in Ukraine, where troops are dying on bleak battlefields, defending grim front lines against a Russian foe. Ukrainian officials pouring scorn on Putin's remarks as irrelevant and confused. There's growing criticism in Russia too, as new images emerge of more coffins, reportedly from the front lines. One prominent Russian military blogger complained that Putin held back from officially declaring war. Not a word about failures and defeats, he writes. There's no point listening any further. But there was one major new announcement, one escalation. To applause, Putin suspending participation in Moscow's last remaining nuclear arms treaty with the United States, and a warning that Russia may restart nuclear tests.
Of course, we will not do it first. But if the US conducts its tests, we will do it as well. Nobody should have dangerous illusions that global strategic parity can be broken.
No illusion either when it comes to Russia's standoff with the West. The Kremlin is even thinking about backing down. OK, after hearing Putin's uncompromising speech, a source close to the Ukrainian president told me tonight that the only way there's ever going to be peace talks is if there are more Ukrainian victories on the battlefield. The sooner Ukraine gets the weapons it needs, this source told me, the sooner this war can come to an end.